Is that we've created our project, and we see the inside of the top level of our project here down in the bottom right with the data folder, the scripts folder, and the .rproj folder for this particular folder, which is the R4 new key folder. And we also see this .r history file that we can simply ignore, actually. So let's suppose we want to create a new script, and we'll create a new Markdown notebook. So to do that, we go to File, New File, and then our Notebook. And that gives us this. And at the top here, we've got the YAML, which is that acronym standing for yet another markup language. And remember, we can basically ignore it, other than to remember not to delete it. We do need to have it there. The 3 dashes there, 3 dashes there. Everything in between it is what's called YAML. By playing around with this, you can in the end adjust the way, in quite powerful ways actually, that the rendered version of your file can one day look. But while you're starting out, for quite a while, and in fact forever if you want, you can simply basically ignore this. What I do though is I tend to change the title to something sensible, like my very informative title. And I get rid of the typos as far as I can, and then I add a couple of other lines. One is the date, which today is the 12th of the June, and then I add the author name. And you can see I haven't put brackets, and I haven't faffed around too much worrying about what format the date has. R Markdown doesn't seem to worry about those. Everything beneath the YAML is the script that you're going to write, and what you get given is exemplar script, which just shows you the kinds of things that you can put in there. Now normally you would just delete it, okay, but and then get going, but since this is our first time, so let's just have a look at what you're shown. There are essentially sort of two kinds of stuff down here. There's text like this, that and all of that, and then in between that there is a code chunk. So a typical notebook contains text for you and I to read, interspersed with code, and that code is denoted as code by being placed within backticks. So 3 backticks at the top there, followed by curly brackets with a little r inside, and 3 backticks to finish off. That denotes that everything inside it is actual R code, and so has to be written according to the rules of R. Everything else is essentially for you and I to read, and it is text that we can format in according to a number of pretty simple rules, and those rules can be found from the help menu, help, and then Markdown quick reference, and they appear down here. And really all these rules do is say how you can put in italics or bold or headers or lists, line breaks, links, images, that sort of thing. So there's a few rules which allow you to denote the way the code actually looks. They're not very complicated. They're designed to be simple. This isn't as fancy as Word, and it's not supposed to be. Okay, if you want something as fancy as Word, then go off to Word. Okay, but this actually has a number of other advantages. The main one being that you can intersperse the code with it and have the code and the output of that code all in the same document as the text that explains what that code does. So this code, the text can be much more extensive than the kind of text that you would put as comments in an old school script. Okay, and the nice thing is that typically when you're working, you're working with your script here. And if I were to save that, let me just save that, and I'll say File, Save As, and I will put it in R4 new key in the scripts folder there, and I will call it demo, and it will get saved as a .rmd file. So if I go and look in the scripts file, can you see there demo.rmd? So that's this script here that we're actually working on. And as you're working, then typically this is all you look at, and you can see that it doesn't quite look like normal script that you might write in a Word file. There's some funny bits there, right? Well, I'll explain those in a minute. But despite those funny bits, it's perfectly readable, right? You don't have to be a tech wizard or wonk to be able to read it. Okay. But let's have a look what happens. So why is the formatting done in this slightly odd way and not just written in bold or as headers and so on? Well, the trick comes in this way. If I go to this button up here and I go to knit, okay, so that's a verb I want you to remember, the knit word. If I knit this file, what happens is stuff starts to whir down here, and then you get this, and this is the magic, okay? This is what I'm going to refer to as the rendered version of my script. And this rendered version, this one is an HTML file, has been saved there, demo.html, okay, in the same folder as my RMD script, okay? And typically you don't need this, okay? It becomes useful if you want to share your script with collaborators. Now, I often do things with students, individual students, and very often these students may not be terribly well informed about R, it may not be useful to them to know the ins and outs of it. So it might be that I just share with them this rendered version and I don't share with them that, okay? Sometimes I might share both versions with them, okay? And they may find the rendered version easier to read, okay? And you see that what you get in the easier to read version is rendered version of the script, and then where you have R chunks, that chunk is both listed here, unless I choose to hide it, and I can do, and then the code itself is implemented, and the results of that code are shown. Okay, and in this case, there was one line of code which says plot this data set called cars, which is built into R, and there you get the plot. Okay. The text is rendered according to the ways in which I've asked for it to be rendered, according to the rules of Markdown. So you see here, this bit here, R Markdown, da 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 da. So R Markdown is written in square brackets. Then there's a URL written in curly brackets. That is the Markdown rule for including a hyperlink. In this case, to R Markdown. Okay, and you can see that rule written here. So if I go to help, and you go to down here, and you see links. Okay, so that is just following that particular rule for how to include a hyperlink. Okay, and if we look at other stuff, you can see, can you see there's some italicized script. And if we look here, the way you get italicized script is according to this rule here, where you just put a single asterisk on either side of the code, okay, or either side of the text, and that means that it gets rendered in italics. If I were to do that and put two asterisks in, okay, so let's do that, and then render it again. Okay, knit. Whoops, I don't want to knit to PDF. Can you see that though? You can actually knit to different forms. I find knitting to HTML the most convenient. So let's do that again, and you can see that if you put two asterisks on either side of your script, it gets rendered in bold. Okay. Other things that we might like to do are to put a header in. So if I might want to add sections, so let's say introduction, and then I'll put 1, 2, 3 subheading, and then render it again. You'll see that what we get is a header, introduction, and then a slightly smaller header, subheading, and they're there because we're following the rule whereby hashes with a space at the beginning of a line indicate that that's a header, and the more hashes you have, the smaller the header is. So 2 hashes is a certain size of header, 3 is a slightly smaller size of header. Okay, do you get the idea? So we mosey along, formatting just writing our script, formatting it occasionally in particular ways if we want bold or headers or italics or hyperlinks or whatever, and the script that we've got here is basically what you work with. So where my cursor is, this is the script I'm actually working with and working on. I can actually, if I want, implement each individual code chunk by pressing that little green thing. So if I press that green arrow, that particular code chunk right there gets implemented right here. So I don't need, if I don't want to do this whole rendering thing and go off making HTML versions. That's nice when you want to share it with someone, but when you're just working on your own, you can write your code in discrete chunks, run those chunks one by one and see what they do, see if they do what you expected, and then in between you can have explanatory text that explains to you yourself what you're doing and why, to you yourself in a week's time or a month's time or a year's time what you were doing and why, or to some other collaborator in a way that's as flexible, frankly, as you need it to be. Okay, so that in essence is the bare bones of how to write a Markdown script. Okay, I write all my R scripts now as Markdown scripts.